For those of you who are just joining the call, we've got this Open Compliance
Hello.
Summit, and we're going to be quite busy in the beginning of December. I believe we're going to have, let's see, 2 or 3 days of Open Source Summit Japan, and then we go to 2 days of the Open Compliance Summit. So it's going to be quite the show.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good
morning, everyone.
So, as usual, what we'll do to start with is dive into our antitrust policy notice. So all of the meetings of the OpenChain project and other Linux Foundation projects operate under the LF antitrust policy. You can find the full policy on our website. And if you're from a member company, you can direct any questions to our counsel, Andy Updegrove. That's the formal bit. The bit that is about the actual call, here's our agenda. We've got two things happening. One is to have a quick look at where we are with the volunteer activity around export control information and open source. In case you're new to that discussion, there was a tremendous resource outlining export control requirements that would be applicable to open source, essentially mostly cryptography, that was maintained by a professor in the Netherlands for many years. He stopped updating it in 2013. And some of the volunteers from this work group approached him and had a discussion about taking his static HTML page and putting it into GitHub in Markdown in a manner that would allow easy updates and translations in the future. So they started a little GitHub repo, which is here. It's open on the issues page at this second. And this GitHub repo contains his website in Markdown format. And there's a lot of content in this particular repo in this little project, the Crypto Law Survey. So lots of countries are covered, a great deal of ground. But as I mentioned, the professor stopped updating it in 2013. So it's a decade without review. And where we're at is that a lot of the key material, like let's say overarching things, the Wassenaar Agreement, has been cleaned up and looks like it's ready to go. So this one, you can see that the professor had his work done here, and then we have Steve from Analog Devices leaning into it and tidying up. We have the European Union material as well, same deal. It's tidied up and ready for review. The big picture status is that the last time we talked, the last time we allocated issues, let me be accurate, was just before we started the summer holiday period. And we allocated various issues to improve various countries. So Julian to take Spain and so on, to have a look at those files and clean them up further. And we also decided to discuss with the overarching things like the Wassenaar Agreement or the European Union material, have we cleaned it up enough to now ask for some export control experts to have a look and see if that material is up to date? Long story short, most of us have been incredibly naughty and we haven't closed any issues since the summer holidays. So as you can see, we're pending. But we are at the stage where we want to ask, for instance, our friends at Ericsson and other companies, if a few of their export control people might dip in and have a look at some of the big picture stuff, as I mentioned. Here we go. Something like the Wassenaar arrangement, putting that in the chat for your reference. Or the European Union material, and to ask people who have export control teams to maybe have a look and see if that looks current. And then over time, we'll continue editing country by country, making the formatting tidy, and then ping export control experts. The reason we called out the Ericsson team in that issue was because at the very start of the export control group, around April of this year, we had 2 or 3 export control people from Ericsson turn up and help set the framing for what we could and should discuss and how we should discuss it. That was thanks to Jimmy, who's on this call and is the chair of the OpenChain project. And thanks to the energy and kindness of the export control team who turned up and helped set the tone for us. But if you or your company have access to export control people, it would be fantastic if you could direct them to the Wassenaar Agreement and European Union pages to see where we're at. And Jimmy just pinged on the chat that he's going to have a word with his export control people to see if they can have a glance at this material. So that's roughly where this initiative is at. This is an independent little project outside of OpenChain, but we're running a space here where the volunteers work on it. And hopefully what will happen over time is that this crypto law survey project will be refreshed, any holes in it, and we will be in a situation where people from OSPOs, other organizations who want to get some context about export control as it might apply to open source can have a look at this stuff, inform themselves, and be more ready to communicate with their corporate export control teams and lawyers in a manner that will make them more comfortable and get the message across. Nicola has a question. Yes, go ahead, Nicola. You have a question regarding the Wassenaar Agreement.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Shane. I'll try not to take up much of the time. Generally, when I reviewed the countries in the past few weeks, it seems that most of the member countries, the only information that we have in the MD files is like they're a member of the or signed the Wassenaar Agreement, and that's about it. Do we aim at some point to add additional information, or the Wassenaar Agreement is the go-to regulation, so to speak, in terms of import-export control?
It's a really good question. Basically, just tagging that the country has signed the Wassenaar Agreement gives us the correct direction. We don't need to add more to the country itself. We just redirect the Wassenaar Agreement page. And basically that agreement is a common agreement between all the countries. Yeah. So the good news is that if they've signed into this, we don't need to add more about the Wassenaar Agreement in their page. We just need to link to the Wassenaar page.
Okay, and if I found a page where the link doesn't work accordingly, should I create a PR to correct it, or?
Oh, yes, please.
Sure. Cool. This effort... yeah, I was reviewing the data lately, and yeah, I found a few countries where the link doesn't lead to the document actually, even though it's added as a hyperlink. So yeah, I'll keep you posted about this when I do it.
Nicola, that's so useful. We're trying to catch those missing links because the conversion from the old HTML site into Markdown does have a few bugs in it.
Yeah, so it's a tricky part.
Right. So what you're proposing to do is exactly what we need, and it will be so useful if you can do that. Hopefully, I mean, ideally, the workflow would be that someone might look at a country like South Korea, and as you can see, the formatting is broken here. South Korea needs more review. And then think, well, I'm selling into somewhere like Spain, which I believe is a signatory of Wassenaar. And then, they're from South Korea. They've had a look at their own export control, but then they want to check Spain, and immediately they see, oh, it's Rasnar agreement, and they go to the Rasnar agreement page, and the link doesn't work.
And as I see, for example, probably the example with Spain, that this is probably added by Julian for the additional domestic laws. For example, since I'm based in Bulgaria, I've recently reviewed the export controls, and there is a really useful document that we can add in here to domestic laws and regulations, probably similar section to that. It's a copy from the Ministry of Defense. So generally speaking, it's an official document and official text that we can use if that is useful.
That would be great. So that would be helping us with Bulgaria, which is currently completely lacking.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, you can add to the agenda that as much as I can, I'll add the information for the Bulgaria page.
That would be fantastic. This missing piece is going to be tremendous, and this type of resource hunting is exactly what's needed. Hopefully, this project will essentially be a living book that will get updated, bit by bit, and I think it'll be useful. I mean, we have an awful lot of open source people aware that there is export control, but there's very limited resources about export control and open source and what are the rules. So hopefully we'll fill in those gaps and it will become a case of clicking the area you want to learn about and you've got material that's reasonably good. All right. I just wanted to see if anyone has additional comments or questions about this.
Not on my end. So that was what I wanted to ask. So thanks all.
Fantastic.
I'm going to share this with my trade compliance counterparts for review. Can't promise that they'll look at it, but I can certainly have a chat with them.
That would be brilliant. That would be brilliant. I mean, we're not looking for anyone to take the responsibility of getting this right, but rather it would be fantastic if someone could cast an eye over it and, say when that's changed, there's a new regulation, and just nitpick a bit. And gradually the nitpicking will kick this into better shape and bring us up to current schedules. And I suppose one thing that we should reiterate, and this is described in the actual project pages, this particular project is designed to be helpful, but it's a survey, and it's not intended to be a canonical resource to tell you the parameters that you must follow for export control. This isn't about getting it right. This is about giving people a helping hand. Okay, if there's no further questions, we'll go into an exciting extra part of our conversation today, which is going to be a proposal for an SPDX export control profile. And for those of you who've been around since the beginning, you'll know that we've come into export control cautiously. People want to have open source and export control done better, done clearly, done in alignment with each other. But we've taken baby steps in this because export control is a heavy topic, and some people are very rightfully cautious about diving into the topic and being misunderstood as solving it for others. We can't really solve it for others, but perhaps we can collect information and perhaps we can create some common understandings and common frameworks to assist the open source community. And that's where this discussion, which is just pending about an export control profile for SPDX, for software bill of materials, might genuinely be hitting the pulse of something useful. So I'll hand over to Umo and Matthew to talk about this. And let us know more about what's going on. Would you like to do a screen share?
I'm happy just to talk to this slide. I've got a link in the chat pending that I'm going to send it in a moment. If you're sharing your screen, when I send it, Shane, if you could just open it up when I get to that part, I'd appreciate it. So I think Shane gave a really good introduction of where this has all come from. You know, we're trying to solve the how here, how we can create a way to communicate export control related terms between different companies. And I like Shane's phrase of giving people a helping hand, because certain companies, depending on where they are, they're going to want to give different types of information to their partners, depending on where they are in the supply chain. So myself, Umo, who's on the call today from Zeiss, and Marcel from Bosch, we have had I think 3 meetings now, so you can tell how early on in its infancy this is, to talk about what we think would be helpful to communicate between our partners under this umbrella of export control. And Umo's created a schema, which if I just put that in the chat now, you can just load up. And it talks about certain fields that we would like to put in there around trade compliance, export control. It has ECCN numbers in there. There is some things around patents as well. And one thing that I will highlight is this is just a collective sum of the things that we thought might be helpful. It's certainly not going to be mandatory for all these fields to be filled in, depending on where you are, what your company's comfort level is of sharing information. But it's there and an opportunity to be standardized. We have spoken to Kate Stewart from SPDX, and she is proposing that we go to their steering committee to see if we can formalize this profile a little bit more. We're not quite there yet, but assuming that the steering committee support this, then we would plan to work on this as a sort of an official SPDX profile. Because there are a number of terms of export control, trade compliance, I think this is going to be called business profile rather than export control. But we're in our infancy. We've had 3 people look at this from 3 different companies. There are going to be many more minds that need to get involved in this before we get anywhere near releasing it. Kate recommended releasing it for SPDX version 3.1, so that's at least 9 months away. I'll hand over to Umo now if he wants to just talk about some of these fields in more detail, and then we can open it up to questions.
Yeah, thank you, Matthew. So just to add to what Matthew was saying, he talked about sharing between companies. So the origin of this version of this profile, this was originally for internal use in Zeiss that I started to see that we needed some way to communicate these between different entities inside our company. So this is what this data set comes from. Maybe this informs a little bit about the fields that we have available here. So I think if we are talking about sharing between companies, there's of course then a whole different level that we maybe need to cover, like trust and how accurate is the information given in there. But yeah, like Matthew said, we discovered between us 3 that each of us was missing something like it, and we were starting early drafts of doing our own schemas or different ways of keeping track of this information. And that's why we thought this might make sense to put it into a standard so everybody is working on the same basis. And yeah, other than people starting now to put information into different things, and then we have to, I don't know, collect this in maybe 2 years again, and everybody has to do their work completely from the ground up when there is then a standard. So this is not a complete list, and like Matthew said, we are early in the process. We don't claim that we have everything covered there, but this is the basis for discussion. And yeah, I think if we start this officially as a working group for SPDX, we will be more ready to accept feedback on it. So if you want to have a look at this repository, feel free to comment on it, but don't expect that there is even a workflow to implement new things and stuff like that.
Thanks, Uma. Any questions from people?
Yeah, Matthew, thank you. This is Andreas. I was just thinking for the export control, this encryption algorithms, the export control mainly depends on the power of the encryption that is put into an algorithm. Do we have a kind of table where we see which countries or which laws restrict what kind of power of the restriction? Like, is it like there's often it's a key length that is used or some algorithm, and depending on that, there may be a very different evaluation on what is restricted and what not. And I was just thinking, do we have an overview of how which criteria are used? So I'm not sure if like the key length or the power of the encryption is the only thing. Maybe there are some others.
I mean, I'm aware of certain aspects of those fields being classified as certain restrictions for certain countries. The way we have this built is that we can provide classification numbers for different jurisdictions depending on what your business or your partner requires. So we wouldn't specify this is the US ECCN if you didn't require US ECCN. There are tables out there that I've seen for the countries that I work with that do specify if you're going to have a certain key length or a certain level of encryption, it's going to have these classification numbers, and therefore there are these consequences. So I don't know if that answers your question or whether someone else can.
I can add something else. In my experience, there is no such thing as a clear indication of strength. So there is a big gap between what the law says and the actual technical details, and it is up to cryptographers to determine. And this is the problem, and this is why I thought that it would be good as part of this exercise to assess and maintain a list of algorithms with the interpreted technical view of their strength, because it's not just the number of bits. It really depends on the algorithm. Equal number of bits could have different strengths depending on the different algorithms, and there is no consensus around the classification of this. So as far as I understand, every company has its own list of algorithms with their reassessed strengths. So this is a point where I believe there is a lot of room for finding common ground and consensus and determining a common way of interpreting these algorithms. As far as I know, that thing doesn't exist.
If there is so much different interpretation, would it make sense that we can give some guidance or an explanation of how it could be done, so that all the companies have like some guidance and not everybody needs to start from scratch again?
Yes, I think the problem is who makes the first step, right? And who will be willing to contribute, because there is another thing, which is just before you get to the classification is the list of algorithms and their naming convention. There is no such thing, right? I mean, it's just like as open source components, everybody calls them in a different way. I think there is there is a lacking common naming convention for the algorithms. And Jimmy, you have your hand raised. Is that or is that from the last time?
No.
Sorry. Yeah, I have my hand raised. It's not for the cryptology part as such, so we can wrap up that discussion if you guys want, and then I can come in. I have a comment on section
4.1 regarding patents, or a question regarding that.
Does anyone want to say anything about the cryptography point then before we move on to patents?
Yeah, maybe just as where we are right now. So what you talked about now, that how you interpret this, this is something that we maybe or probably would not aim to in the first step. So for now, I think we will, at least as this business profile, we would stick to just noting down maybe what algorithms you would have in your software, and then leave the interpretation to specialists, but give them a way to read out these details in a defined way, so that not every export control department or lawyer, whoever does then the evaluation, has to ask again their developers what's in there, but have a distinct field to explain there's cryptology in there, and then maybe a description on the algorithm. And if this is covered by company policy, they might have an easier way to compare it to this, or then at least know that they have to ask again and get more details to evaluate it.
Just as a starter, I have contributed a list of algorithms a while ago, which is the list of algorithms detected today by ScanOSS. And that could be a foundation. I mean, at least an initial list, and it would be great if and we start cooperating into not getting the classification, but at least just getting the list of algorithms in some place, right? Would that make sense to?
Yeah, probably. I think if there is such a list to take as a base, that would help. I think it's maybe comparable to how we deal with open source licenses, that we have the SPDX identifiers that everybody agrees on. If we have something like that for crypto, I think this would help.
Maybe I can add something based on the list that Julian has provided quite a while ago. We have provided a mechanism to describe we can use this repository here, where we have all the country-specific definitions, and it's possible that we have built an extension for exactly this repository, which we have also contributed quite a couple of months ago. So that we can actually try to agree on algorithms per country, whether they are good for import or export, probably just in a high, medium, low scale concerning risks and so on. And then it will automatically build such a kind of a map per country. And this kind of information, I think, is something very valuable that can be put into this kind of profile here, and then every company is receiving the ingredients list can decide whether they want to eat or not eat this sort of algorithm for their purpose. I guess this would be great benefit so you do not need to search again. Yeah.
I think this would probably help, but I don't know if it's the right place to put it inside the profile. I think this is, again, comparing to licenses, that would be like a classification like copyleft or permissive. And this is something where even today companies have probably different opinions when it comes to the details. And so this is something that I would see next to such a profile, that there is a list to inform and give a starting point. But I wouldn't put it inside the profile, because then you might have people disagreeing, and this could kill such a standard, I think, if there's too much information in there that people disagree on.
Yeah, sorry, you got me wrong. My ambition was to have the list with our suggestions provided by inside this repository, and just list the algorithms found inside the profile. So then everybody can use the public information to make his own choice, whether he's going conform with what we suggest, or what is suggested here as a common sense, and or whether he's doing it differently, but he has the information in the profile, and then classification is not given, because you do not know what the user will do with this software.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Should we move on to Jimmy and the patent question?
Yes. So I'm curious about section 4.1 with the patent information. Sort of what sort of information is envisioned to go there, and sort of the purpose of the field. Yeah. If someone could elaborate a bit on the thinking with that one.
Umo, do you want to describe the use case for that that you use internally?
Yeah, I can, I think. So this is mainly a placeholder just to keep in mind that we should probably put some information about patent in the business profile, but I don't have a very defined idea on how best to achieve this. This only comes from my experience that there's some software out there in the world that is, for example, licensed under an open source license, and you have a very hard time to find that this is also covered by some patents. And so if you would then have an SPDX SBOM on such a software, and people would just take this and see, okay, this is a BSD license without information that there is some patent attached to it, then you would having people making mistakes because they just don't know that patent restrictions also apply to this product or software or whatever. And so this is just the thinking that there should be something in there, but for the moment, this is, I don't know, maybe just a string to write in there, okay, here some patent information applies, keep this in mind, or something like that.
So my concern with that would be if I'm being given such an SBOM, that effectively puts me on notice and makes me a willful infringer, which at least in the US would treble my damages for patent infringement. So I would be very, very hesitant to be receiving such an SBOM with that information in it. So I think that that's probably one of the places. Sorry, my son is home from kindergarten today sick, so he's here in the background. But anyhow, so that's one of the things I probably think is sort of better left up to individual companies to determine. It's also, well, just because the patent exists doesn't necessarily mean that someone has made the evaluation that it is essential for that open source implementation, right? I mean, that's coming from the standard essential patent field. That's an extremely tricky determination to do, especially since it's not the patent owner itself might not have declared it, and certainly even if they have declared that it is essential, that doesn't come with any obligation for them to license it, assuming they have not been part of contributing code to that specific open source project, reading upon that specific patent. So I would be extremely hesitant to put something on patents into the business profile. Just raising a sort of a little bit of caution around that one.
But I mean, having a place to put it, probably it's not something that should be filled. But if you want to fill it and you want to accompany it, there's a place you can put it. I mean, it's if it's not mandatory to put it.
But I think Jimmy's point is if you put it down and you send it to somebody else, that recipient is then almost willfully infringing things if something's gone wrong. And
yeah, I know. But on the other hand, it gives him the option to react and prevent the use of it. Yeah, with this knowledge. I mean, I know that it's difficult when you just start using without looking, but on the other hand, it gives you options to act. Yeah.
Wouldn't it be the opposite? Wouldn't it mean that that recipient would then have to start avoiding SBOMs that come from a particular source in case they contain patent information?
That would certainly be the case in my company's case. We would never accept an SBOM that contained that information because of the risk that we would be seen as willful infringers. And the problem is if we receive one and accept one by mistake almost, that's problematic. It's also the problematic in the sense that by having this field, we may create the expectation in the market that this is information that needed to be provided. It's also how do we verify sort of the prominence of that information. So say, for example, that we would have the scenario that we have an NPE or patent assertion entity that has a patent they believe have a read on an open source component. If they start contributing to SBOMs and start contributing that information, that has sort of unnecessarily or in an unfortunate way then changed the landscape and almost forcing people to take a license if they're approached by them to avoid any accusation of being willful infringers. So there's the possibility that something like that might be misused if it exists, and even if it's not mandatory, even if it's a field that is not mandatory, even if it's an optional field. There's also the issue: what if I have patents that read upon open source software that I ship in an SBOM? Could there be arguments that I'm expected to fill out that, even though it's not mandatory? Would that impact my ability to enforce those patents? That's not something we necessarily want to do anyhow, but there certainly could be an expectation that, or an argument to be had, that we should have filled out that information if we had it, and if we believed that our patent had a read on that open source software. Anything less would sort of almost be entrapment, and sort of snaring people in by excluding that information. So it also creates the expectation on me to perform patent searches on my own patents to put that information in.
You make really good, valuable points there, Jimmy. I think we need to, flesh this out a bit more and see whether we do want to keep these fields in there, want to make them optional, want to put caveats in there. It goes to show that this is, new, needs to be reviewed and evolved so we can have something that the whole community is comfortable with.
And
just a final point as well, and I think I like the idea of this profile. It's this specific field that slightly worries me. We might be able to work out something that works here, but it's also so that if I put in someone else's patent information here, or exclude to do that could be problematic in the sense that I might have been privy to, for example, receiving claim charts during patent negotiations that shows a read on certain open source software that I'm using, but I would be prevented from putting that information in due to the NDAs I have signed that would prevent me from disclosing that further. So I'm just seeing a bunch of problems here, not problems we couldn't solve, but certainly problems that needs to be discussed. So I'm happy to engage further on the topic, and I think that the idea of this is really great, and it seems like a great idea for a profile.
I just wanted to jump in, which is very much adjacent to what both Matthew and Jimmy said, which is one of the key things we're able to do with this open community is to talk through topics. And it's tremendously valuable to have this process of raising ideas and raising counter ideas. In essence, we may or may not be able to pursue all of the items that people come up with, but by examining them, by talking them through, we will find a common understanding and a common solution. And this business profile seems to have tremendous potential. It's really a case of getting feedback on the various ideas of what could be in it. And I really like how we can do this in such an open way that everyone can dial in, share ideas. I think it's a remarkable power that we see inside the OpenChain community and open source at large. I just noticed that Andreas has his hand up as well.
Yeah, I had one question with regards to the patents. I'm not sure, maybe I missed something, but what is the correlation between export control and patents? Is there any direct dependency, or is that just another area that needs to be taken care of?
As I see it, this would be more of the business profile, including different aspects as opposed to, yeah. So it's export control happens to be under business profile, but so would potentially patents or other items. So it's not export control and patents are linked at all.
Okay, so then I understand. I had the first assumption that everything is somehow under the export control thing.
No, I mean, we started by discussing export control and then realized there were a few other things. And to Umo's comment earlier, this has come internally from him and kind of bringing things in together and then changing the name of the profile to business rather than keeping it as export.
Okay, so then it makes sense. We also just need to change the name because it's still export control schema.
Is it? Well spotted.
And the top.
Yeah,
and the
yeah, I can
URL.
see it now. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That does need some help. I noticed Stephen has a bunch of items on 3.2. He's got a question, AEB questions. What does AEB stand for? And 3.5, country of origin is a string. Should it be an array of strings? And then he also has a note about patents, but I'll leave that to him to talk through as well. Just first of all on 3.2, what is AEB questions?
I was just writing an answer into the chat, we can say just around. So this is just a leftover term that we used internally for this stuff. I think I should maybe change this because there's no place in there. So the idea behind this was to give a space to post individual questions and answers that might be relevant to the type of software or product or whatever you are using. So something, or before we had a cryptology field as a distinct entity that was, for example, you would have the question, is cryptology in there? And then the developer can put in, okay, yeah, there is no cryptology in here or something like that. So just have a space where some more freedom is given rather than just specific fields to put information into. And yeah, the country of origin should probably be an array. I can change this as well.
Okay, thanks. Another thought that comes to mind just now is I'm wondering whether it would make sense for the crypto information to include an optional list of APIs or methods or something that provide that functionality. Since if you don't make any use of that API, that functionality, and you don't expose any way to get at it, then as I understand it, that's equivalent to it not being there. So it would be useful for a recipient to know not just whether the component contains cryptography, but whether it's being used as part of the deployed use of the component.
Yeah, good note.
In fact, Julian, I'm not sure whether you do something like that in ScanNSS, do you?
Well, actually, we do detect the function names. That's how we detect the cryptographic algorithm. But the question, I was just thinking, does it really matter? if you're using it or not. I mean, if you are distributing, I think, and again, I'm not an expert. I'm just, I might be wrong, but as far as I believe, and I remember, what matters is if you're distributing the source code or not. I mean, if that function, that cryptographic algorithm is part of your delivery of your product, even if you're not using it, I understand that that you still need to report it.
Well, you did say source code there, and I think that's the key phrase, because the advice that we got, which again is not advice that applies to anybody else, was that if you're distributing the code in binary form, so the functionality is in what you ship, but you're not using it and you don't provide any means for anybody else to use it, it's equivalent to it not being there.
I don't know, Steve. I mean, I'm just getting totally off road there. No, I don't know.
I guess this sort of definition is very country specific, and sometimes it differentiates even for, whether it's an inbound or an outbound transaction. So, for example, import into France, whenever it has the capability to encrypt, it would be good to be mentioned to the authorities, whether you're using it or not. And it's very, very, very different.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, my point was that it may be useful to know where the functionality is in the component, so that you can at least go and investigate, rather than just knowing it's simply there.
This has all been great. Thank you for your input. We're going to be continuing having these conversations. Those who want to carry on the conversation, want to let me know, raise their hand, say something now, send me an email. We can hopefully evolve this profile over the next 9 months or so. And it would be great to have your input, because it's been a great conversation today.
Absolutely. And this, I think, is hopefully a venue where you can swing back and run through some of these topics again. This business profile concept appears to align with a lot of the energy we've seen in the room that brought people together on the export control topic. And the fact that SPDX is considering this for 3.1 is obviously a matter of huge interest. So thank you very much, Umo and Matthew, and please pass my regards to Marcel as well for his founding of this alongside you. Right. Oh, absolutely. Is there any other business? If there's no other business, then we can say we've had a very successful call. We've got a lot of people who've contributed since April to, this group. Some people on the call, like Steve and Julian, have spent a lot of time in contributing ideas and energy, and some people have been relatively new to our group. And I just want to say that while this is one of the newest work groups in OpenChain, I think it's been admirable how far we've gone from looking in April and saying, is there anything about open source and export control, and kind of this silence in the room, to having a resource being developed on the web, a reference library project, and now having this potential for a business profile. This is unbelievable progress in 9 months or less. Well done all, and please have a beautiful day.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.